On this episode of He Said, She Heard, I sit down with the author of the book, None of This Is Going According to Plan, Brandee Stilwell. And during the interview, we dive into two stories from that very book. All this and more on He Said, She Heard.
Listen to the Fortress Podcast.
He said she heard about what's going on.
Oh, yeah.
He said she heard about what's going on. About what's going on.
Hey, Foxer.
Welcome to He Said, She Heard. I'm your host, Mike Fox, and we've got a great show for you. And thank you all for supporting this show over the last 2 years and some change, especially our good friend Jennifer Perry of Madame Perry Salon, because without her, this actual episode wouldn't be possible. Now, don't forget to subscribe via your preferred podcasting app. And if you want some fancy-dancy merch, well, it's not really fancy, head over to our TeePublic merch store by going to www.hesaidSheheard.com and clicking on Shop Now. Okay, as I said before, this episode wouldn't be possible without Jennifer Perry, because joining me is the creator and writer of Sasquatch Detective, which is published, by the way, by DC Comics. Brandee Stilwell is joining us, and she's also worked behind the scenes on such iconic shows as Mad TV, Family Guy, American Dad. She's also got some Disney credits to her name as well. And, of course, one of the main reasons that she's here is because she's got a book here that I just can't put down. It is so funny. The book is called None of This Is Going According to Plan. It's a collection of hilarious but true stories. And it's, rather than it's chapter by chapter, it's story by story. And we're actually going to play two audio skits that are derived from this book of the author who is joining me. So without any further ado, I give you Brandee Stiwell. How are you, Brandee?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Oh, of course. Just heard a strange echo come out of nowhere. So, Brandee, just to tell us about this book here, and because I love how it starts in your early life in Kansas. The first chapter, which we act out, handheld Pomeranian sex, to go from that to these showbiz stories where you're with George Michael. It's just it's an incredible journey. So just tell us about how you decide, okay, I gotta put this pen to paper and get this out there. Tell us about that.
You know, like my whole life, just random things would happen. And, you know, my dad used to introduce me as his daughter that had the black cloud that followed her everywhere she went. And you're like, thank you. But I've always been that person that I could just be with a group of friends and simply get up and go to the bathroom and something horrific would happen. And I'd come back soaking wet and everyone's like, what happened? You just went to the bathroom. And I'm like, oh, well, they were cleaning a stall and I didn't see the sign and I slid under another stall and made eye contact with some random woman on the toilet. And now I have all kinds of DNA that is not mine, like in my hair and on my back. So, I mean, things like that happen every day. And, you know, some are book worthy, some aren't. And you just kind of learn to accept it and go on. And I think one of the key points is, you know, in the book is you get knocked down 7 times, you got to make sure you get back up 8. So
Yeah.
I'm used to, and I'm used to having weird, bizarre things happen. And sometimes they're absolutely amazing. And other times they're like horrific and tragic. And then we're like, oh, okay, well, we can't tell that story. And then, you know, but it's, you know, is the glass half full or half empty? And it's all just how you look at it. And so that's how I've just kind of gone through life. I mean, yesterday I went to a bougie party at a polo club in Santa Barbara, and I'm like, why am I being invited to this? But of course, in the morning, I'm like, oh, let me put a mask on my face.
Right.
to make sure my skin looks good. And it's one of those kind that you should only put on for 10 minutes, but I was busy doing other things, so it was on for 25. So when I took it off, my face looked like it had pulled all the blood to the front of my face. And I'm like, well, we won't get there for a few hours, so maybe my skin will have time to calm down. And then, of course, even yesterday, here we are under these tents, and there were some elderly people at the table with us, and they kept pushing us out of the shade. So now I'm like charred, I'm like sunburned. I have marks all over my body now that I haven't had in years.
Wow.
Even this morning, I looked in the mirror and I'm like, I kind of jumped back. I'm like, whew, now I have to do a podcast, and I look amazing. But it's just, it's a Sunday. It's a Sunday, Mike. So what are you going to do?
Exactly. Are you going to go to church?
You're going to have a pulse.
What I love about your writing style is how punchy it is. And because it doesn't rely heavily on dialogue, but we were able to find spots where, there's some memorable lines here said by your mother. But the whole bit by bit is just so, okay, then this happened. And then that happened. You're like, wait, what? What did I just read?
Yeah. It's a pile-on.
Exactly. Well, you see, that's how life is day to day. Everything is so random and so juxtaposed that's how it happens. That's why every chapter in this book, and it sounds like based on what you were just talking about, that the saga is continuing, and you've probably got material for another book coming up, I'm guessing, right?
Well, Mike, yes. Actually, the day that it went to the printer,
yes.
We pulled 8 stories. I mean, it's over 400 pages. And I had called the publisher. I'm like, can we just pull at least 8 stories? And even still pulling 8 stories, it's, like I said, still over 400 pages. And it's already been greenlit for a sequel.
That's fantastic.
And it's also, I hate social media, and I really want to get rid of my Facebook page, but the reason why I haven't is because every day there's your memory section.
Yes.
And so I'm like, I'm getting to the point where I'm like, Devo, when the hell did I see Devo? I'm like, oh, I guess I did. I forgot about that, but it's also I would always write these stories, story time with Aunt Brandee, and it would be ridiculous shit that had happened. And then I'd be like, oh my God, oh shit, yes, I'm sorry I cussed, I hope that's okay.
No, it's all right.
And I'm just oh my God, I completely forgot about that. And here I kind of have it all written out, and then I'm like, oh, I keep a journal with me on my desk. There's the voice memos on your phone now.
Yes.
And so if I'm driving and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, you see something, you're reminded. I'm like, oh my God, I remember when this happened. That's book worthy. So, I think I have 35 other stories that are ready to go for the sequel. And then, of course, every day you're like, oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Let me over here.
I can't wait for the sequel.
And there's
really
some doozies. And originally, the book was called Jesus Hates Me, but My Mother Tolerates Me, 70 Short Stories to give you a vague idea why. And then, of course, everyone was on board with that. Everybody, except my mother. She vetoed it. She's my own personal stalker, and
that's hilarious.
It actually made her cry, and so I was like, okay, I need to change the title of this. Aww. And then originally 70 stories, and we'd gotten it down. I had cut some and added some, and then it was 68, and then, like I said, the day it went to the printer, it ended up being 60. So, wow. Lots of stories to tell, Mike.
Lots of stories to tell.
I'm tired.
Well, I'll give your mouth a rest. I'll give both of our mouths a rest because right now I want to play a chapter from your book, a story from your book, rather. This is the first one. I particularly chose 2 stories that I wanted to have acted out and you narrate. So I chose one that was from your early life, handheld Pomeranian sex, and then the other one was the Jesus Call. So right now we're going to play you This is the first story in this book. None of this is going according to plan. From Brandee Stilwell's book, None of This is Going According to Plan. Here's Handheld Pomeranian Sex.
When I was 9 and my sister 11, we were in town with our mother. We had stopped by my grandmother Mary's house for a quick visit. My grandmother Mary is a very sturdy kind of woman. She's full-blooded Cherokee Indian, a little rough on the edges, religious and not exactly warm or gentle. My grandfather had passed away a year earlier from emphysema from when the story took place. My widowed grandmother was left by herself and her 2 Pomeranians, Sparky and Pom Pom. Her religion was apostolic Pentecostal, and she definitely looked the part as it was the early 80s. She wore her hair like Aunt Bee from the Andy Griffith Show as well as the other women in her church. You could spot them a mile away. Apostolic Pentecostal had rules to follow, especially for the women, or at least they did years ago. Again, that's when the story took place. As we were pulling into my grandmother's driveway, we noticed her sitting out on the front porch with her 2 dogs, Pom Pom and Sparky. I excitedly leaped from the steel rolling van before my mother could place it into park. I blew through the front yard gate to hug my grandmother, but was immediately stopped dead in my tracks. I was witnessing my grandmother partake in some sort of violence towards the younger female dog, Pom Pom. She had a death grip with one hand on Sparky, who was behind Pom Pom with an excited look on his dog face, breathing heavily, with the same force holding Pom Pom in place with her other hand. Pom Pom didn't seem to be enjoying herself like Sparky was. She had labored breathing and was making odd squeaking noises. I had no idea what was happening here, but I didn't like it. It was terrifying and incredibly uncomfortable to watch. I wanted to grab Pom Pom and run for the hills, but my grandmother was the ringleader in this whole ordeal, so I stood in silence. While this moment of awkwardness was still taking place, my mother and sister joined me, mirroring the same look of terror I knew I had spread across my face. The 3 of us observed our holier-than-thou religious grandmother holding her 2 Pomeranians together, while violent penetration was taking place. Now, I sort of maybe kind of knew what was going on and what they were doing, but to have my first visualization of sex and to have my grandmother involved was a little too much. It was super gross to say the least, and I knew this moment was going to haunt me for years to come, and it absolutely did.
Girls, I've been out in the garden all morning. I've picked some green beans. Why don't you girls go inside and get some green beans? Oh, and Ginny, there's a bowl of freshly picked okra in the refrigerator. You should take some with you. The onion patch is coming along pretty well this year, too.
Our mother hurriedly escorted us inside and away from the crime scene.
Let's go inside, kids.
I can still hear the assaults. My grandmother yelled back into the house that
She's almost done. I'll be inside soon.
Good to know, Grandma. Seriously, what the fuck? One would think at that moment would have been a good time to discuss reproduction, sex, or even rape with us. But the only thing that was ever said from our mother to reassure us about what was taking place on the front porch was that we would discuss it on the way home. However, it was never discussed on the way home, or ever for that matter.
That had to have been traumatizing. Oh, boy.
I close my eyes and still see it all these years later.
Oh, boy. It didn't help that I had to just replay that for you. Oh, gosh.
It's my Vietnam.
Yes. PTSD.
Yeah.
Wow. But, yeah, what I love is, like, immediately after the following chapter, Skid Marked Face, you talk about how that was the first and last time your dad was ever watching you and your sister on his own because it ended with the house almost going up in flames.
Yeah, pretty much.
Now, I love later on in the book, especially getting to the Jesus call, which we'll get to, momentarily. The story continues. You keep having these situations happen to you, and you think, why me? You almost thought that the films were exposed, and you were glad that you reached in the back of you, and you were touching like an extension cord or something, a cable.
Oh yeah, I was on a film shoot, and I had volunteered
I took the director home, but I also had the film that hadn't been developed yet. I mean, nobody shoots, I mean, hardly anybody, especially, you know, a smaller production company would never shoot on film these days. But
These days, right.
back in the day, so I had all these film canisters in the back of my car, and I had just broken up with this guy, like literally like a few days before. And, you know, it was one of those things, like, as a woman, you know, like, you're like, yes, this is the right thing for me to have done, to have broken up with him, but like, maybe I'll call him and see, you know, like, how are things, you know. Right. But I'm driving back to the production office, and I go past this bowling alley that I had introduced him to, and I see this Jeep in the center lane, and I'm like, oh my God, it's Don, and he's making out with some new girl.
Oh no!
I mean, it's Los Angeles, so there's like 4 million people here. So yes. What are the odds?
What are the odds?
Yeah, so I was upset and took a sharp left turn into the neighborhood where the production company was, and you just hear all of the film canisters like scattering all over the back seat, and then it's just like, you know, I become religious and hope that I have not opened film canisters with an exposed film.
Wow.
Slowly sticking my hand behind my back, and the first thing I feel is an extension cord, but in my mind, it's film, and I'm gonna be fired. I'm gonna be blacklisted. It's just 1,000 things, and like everything I've sacrificed in my life is now over. But then I realized that it was just an extension cord, and you know, the gaffer tape held on the film canisters. They didn't pop open. I didn't get fired. It was all good.
You're like, thank God, I'm safe.
Yes. Thank you, universe, or 6 pound, 3 ounce baby Jesus, whatever you worship. Thank you for not letting that happen.
What's the most like bizarre thing you've had where you were, you know, working behind the scenes in any one of your jobs, and a celebrity was involved, and you were like, it just felt so surreal and juxtaposed. You were just thinking, this just can't be happening right now. And you were like pinching yourself to make sure this wasn't a dream.
Gosh, I mean, I worked at Family Guy, so we had all sorts of people come through. You know, I worked with Betty White on numerous occasions. Wow. And my grandmother passed away when I was 12 in a bad car accident, and so in my head, Betty White was my grandmother, and so every time I ended up working with her, it was just like, be an adult, act normal, try not, you know. But you know, it was also her philanthropy of what she had done with it for animals. Yeah. That, you know, I cried, and you know, I may have embarrassed myself a few times with her. And she was, you know, she was the sharpest one in the room, and yes. Never missed a beat, clear up until the very end. And I would also say, you know, random, like Phyllis Diller. Wow. Gosh, I know I met Chevy Chase came in, but he was, you know, sometimes you hear the thing of the saying, like, don't meet your heroes because they'll only disappoint. Yes. He was not kind. He was angry and kind of mean and rude.
I've heard about that actually, yeah.
Yeah, and then the writers, Family Guy, were like, it destroyed everybody because everyone was so excited.
Yes.
You know, it's Chevy Chase.
Yeah, they're excited to meet Fletch.
Yeah. You know, exactly. And but then, you know, then Carrie Fisher would come in, and, you know, she was just, you know, I love her, you know, her mother, and, you know, just everything about Carrie Fisher. So, those were surreal. I had a lot of surreal moments at Family Guy. Good and bad. I remember there was one time, it was Jenny Garth, Jason Priestley, and Tori Spelling came in. Yeah. And it was supposed to be a scene with Andrea Zuckerman, but Alex Borstein was supposed to play Andrea Zuckerman. So it was like the three of them were in the booth, and then Alex was supposed to come in and record, but Andrea Zuckerman, the joke was that, and she was, well, on Beverly Hills 90210, it was like there's teenagers, and then Andrea was like 30, playing this teenager.
Yeah.
So in the cutaway, she's like 80, but Alex was going to be playing her, and Alex was like, I'm not doing it. So Seth is like, Brandee, get in the booth. So here's, Brandon, Kelly, and Donna Martin in the booth, and they're all excited talking about prom, and I'm in there playing Andrea Zuckerman, like, Barbara Stanwyck and I used to take the trolley. The orange girl as far as the eye could see. And then it's just like, oh, don't hate me for the, and they thought it was funny, but it was still, Alex was just like, F this, I'm not going in there and doing that. So it's like, Brandee, you're the short stick, get in there. You've drawn it. So, it's just things like that. Charles Durning teaching you how to tie a sailor's knot while he's waiting to go into the record booth, or while we would be waiting for Seth to come back from a meeting or something so we could start recording. Just random stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, life is just juxtaposed like that. Yeah. My previous guest that I had on here, she had written a stage play about surviving infertility through comedy and made a whole one-woman show out of that. And that's one of the things she was talking about in writing comedies. It's just like life is like that. It's so juxtaposed and surreal. And getting back to your book, it's like that's why each chapter has its own title, its own story, because it's like each story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And of course, like all jokes, they come in threes, particularly this next story that we're going to play for you, the Jesus Call. And I wanted to pick another story that was going to be during your the career part of your life, and one from your childhood, the one we heard before. The Jesus Call is just so funny because you're working on the set of the Jeff Foxworthy show, and your mother just calls you randomly, and this is before the days of cell phones. I'm guessing this was the 90s. From Brandee Stilwell's book, None of This Is Going According to Plan, here's the Jesus Call.
I'd been the post supervisor on the NBC version of the Jeff Foxworthy show for about a month and a half. The shooting season was almost over, but they hadn't had anyone in the position when the season started, so they had to create a workspace for me in the already crowded production office. Since I was going to be splitting my time between the lot and the post-production house, they put me and my desk at the end of a long hallway in the production bungalow on the CBS Radford lot. I was very lucky to be a part of this crew. Everyone got along and enjoyed one another's company except for the two producers. They were not fans of one another at all. It was like mom and dad were threatening a divorce on a daily basis. But all the kids got along, and that's what really mattered. I had just delivered next week's episode to the network when I sat myself down at my desk. Ted Wass, who played the father on Blossom, was the director on our show. He was standing just outside of our edit bay in front of my desk. G.W. Bailey, who played Rizzo on MASH, had wandered into the production office to chit-chat with everyone. He was the nicest guy. Not to mention the staff was buzzing around. My landline rang. It was my mother. She was upset and crying. Oh my God, my grandmother just died, I thought. Nope, Grandma was fine. Dad, fine. Stepfather, fine. Sister, fine. Oh my God, my German Shepherd Shadow died. Nope, she's fine too. Car accident? Nope. Fire? No. Cancer? No, everyone and everything was fine. I asked my mom what could possibly be wrong. My mistake. After a few moments, she was able to compose herself. Through her tears, she was able to tell me she was upset with me. What the hell did I do now? I couldn't wrap my brain around it. I hadn't spoken to any family members, let alone seen any of them in months to offend anyone. I had been at work all day. What did I do now? Apparently, it was Christ. Yes, Jesus Christ. I hadn't accepted him into my heart yet. The hell are you talking about, woman? My mother began to tell me she knew I wasn't religious, and if I didn't take Jesus Christ into my heart, I wasn't going to be allowed to get into heaven where she was planning on going. I started to laugh. I thought it was a joke. Okay, who's playing this prank because you got me? This is a fantastic joke. Who put you up to this one? I looked around the office to see if anyone was in on it. No one was. This was for real and actually happening. I was exposed. My desk was out in the open. I had no privacy. I decided to humor my mother by asking her when she was planning on going to this exclusive place called heaven that I was apparently being discriminated against from getting into. Did she already make reservations? Who else was she planning on taking? Who else was going to get an invitation to this secret exclusive party? She wasn't pleased, and I was apparently only making things worse. She scolded me through her gasping breath. Knowing one of our producers was at a budget meeting across the lot, I knew her office would be empty. I asked my mother to hold on for a second so I could transfer the call to the producer's landline phone. I answered the producer's phone in her empty office so I could continue this crazy random conversation with my mother. I had closed the door for privacy after pacing back and forth a few minutes. My ADHD had caught up with me. I needed new space to be able to handle the revelation my mother was having. I ended crawling underneath the producer's desk, still on the landline phone, to get a better scenic view sitting Indian style. I was going to get to the bottom of this unexpected and ridiculous phone call. Now that I had privacy, I asked, "Mom, what brought this on? Who told you this? What church are you attending now? Who planted these BS thoughts in your head? Can we talk about this later?" I was about to plead my case with my mother to pick the conversation back up at a later time when I heard the closed office door open. Crap, I thought. Susan, the producer, had returned early from her meeting. But it wasn't Susan. It was one of the stars of the show. I'm not going to name names here to protect the innocent, so I'll refer to him as Kevin. I knew Kevin was in the edit bay next door. Our editor, Tony, had invited him over to look at a cut earlier in the day, but I honestly thought he had already left. Anyway, through the cracks of the desk, I could see that it was Kevin who had entered the producer's office. I wasn't sure what he was doing in there until I heard him release a giant fart. It was the kind of fart you could tell he had been holding in for some time. But unbeknownst to him, I was hiding from my mother and Jesus under an unoccupied desk, and now caught in the middle of his fart debris field. After releasing his fart out into the wild, he walked back out of the room, closing the door behind him. I could hear the edit bay door open and then close next door. I started to snicker, trying to control myself, quite aware of how absurd this whole predicament I found myself in was. But that was short-lived. Not only was my mother going off on me for not taking Jesus Christ into my heart in one ear, but out the other, I could hear the edit bay door open and close again. Then the room I was concealing myself in had opened and closed again too. Oh no, round two. Right before Kevin re-entered the room, I had pulled Susan's chair back under her desk in attempts to help camouflage my whereabouts. But this time it was different. Kevin had walked all the way into the room to look out Susan's window, pulling the blinds open while he was dropping a different kind of fart. This one sounded like he was skipping a rock across a pond.
I blew a stinking fart.
I had pressed the phone's transmitter speaker as far as I could into my head to muffle my mother's ranting while simultaneously covering the receiver with my hand. I thought about finding religion in that moment, praying Kevin wouldn't look down and make eye contact with me under the desk, or that he wouldn't notice the desk phone was missing from the cradle with the black phone cord leading to my existence like a breadcrumb trail. Kevin let out another fart before he closed the horizontal vinyl blinds. The door behind me opened and then promptly closed again. As Kevin exited, I could hear him entering the edit bay again. I busted out laughing, which only infuriated my mother to no end. In her defense, though, she had no way of knowing what was transpiring on my side of her story. I was sweating bullets. I knew my timeline was limited as comedy happens in threes, and Kevin would be back sooner than later for his third round. I told my mother I needed to transfer her back to my desk and for her to hold on another minute. My mother's unprovoked rampage was still ongoing when Susan showed up a few minutes later. Kevin not only had left Susan's office, but the edit bay and bungalow altogether. Susan opened her door, placing her bags down on her couch. I remember hearing her proclaiming, "Jesus Christ, it stinks in here." And at that point, I could no longer control my laughter, because Jesus had been in her office all right. My mother was so angry at me for laughing, she proclaimed,
"I'm
done. Shame on you. You're being so disrespectful.
And with that, she hung up on me. I watched Susan walk into the unisex bathroom located on the other side of my hallway desk office to retrieve room spray. I still had the phone handset held next to my ear so Susan would think I was still on the phone, so she wouldn't question me why I thought her office smelled like an outhouse. I had my finger holding down the receiver, still taking in everything that had just transpired. How did I become the first family member on my mother's religious phone chain? Normal people get drunk dialed from their friends. I get the Jesus call from my mother. I called my mother later that night, but she didn't want to talk about her phone call earlier in the day any longer. She went silent on the whole Jesus ordeal for a few years, but when she brought Jesus back up, it was story-worthy. Don't worry, he'll show up again in a few years from now.
I can only imagine the smell. Oh, especially that he came in twice, right? To fart.
Yeah.
I guess he was looking for somebody. I was thinking that, okay, that's probably why he's like opening up the blinds. He's probably waiting for somebody to show up in the lot, I'm guessing.
Or buying time to produce more gas so it can escape, so he can go back into the other room.
Now, G.W. Bailey, wasn't he also Captain Harris on Police Academy, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
With the dogs and the pant legs that went above the ankles, which is trendy now, but, you know, wow. Back then.
Back then, though, you'd only see it on seniors.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Now, I really love your book. Now, tell us about Sasquatch Detective.
Sasquatch Detective came about because, well, I had been doing improv, and there was several, you know, there were different theaters around LA back in the day, pre-COVID. Like, it's so sad, like, everything's gone now. Like, they didn't survive. But I think, like, I was at IO West, and somebody had gone out on stage and established that they were in the woods. And so I came out as a Yeti named Tanya, because I'd been talking about Tanya Harding earlier that day, and I love Tanya Harding. You know, everyone always gravitated towards Nancy Kerrigan, but I always gravitated towards the underdog, and I love Tanya Harding. And so the name was in my head, so I came out as this Yeti named Tanya. And I had a podcast, the Yeti had a podcast, and I was trying to recruit people to come be on my campers. I was trying to recruit campers to come be on my podcast. Oh, wow. And then I ended up at Second City, and I got into the grad program. And one of the things that we had to do, there were 8 people on our grad team. It was 4 women and 4 men. And our director, Ron West, was like, one of the writing assignments was for everyone to go home, and you had to write a sketch that had all 4 women in it. And it could be, you know, you could add 1 guy, 2 guys, everybody, but as long as all 4 women were accounted for in the sketch. And I was on my way to WonderCon, which was in Anaheim, and I had lived in Glendale at the time, so I was jumping on the 110, which is over by Chavez Ravine, where the Dodgers play. Okay. And there is a sign that says Police Academy Road. Well, if you remember from Charlie's Angels, that was from the opening of Charlie's Angels, and it was once upon a time 3 little girls went to the police academy. So I'm like, oh my God, that's it. I'm going to write a Charlie's Angels sketch, and I'm going to add a Yeti. And it became Yeti Detective, and then our director was like, I think Sasquatch sounds better, and I fought him, but then I was like, no, you're right, it is better. And so it became Sasquatch Detective, and then it ended up anchoring our grad show, and everyone that came to it, like, it just, like, it exploded. It was like the last scene, and it was high energy, and it was just chaos, but it was hilarious. And because you had, you know, they were recruiting for the police academy, and you had the beauty the brawn, and the brains that had come out, the 3 women before. And then I would crawl over a pony wall and as a Sasquatch, and was asking for, diversity and for, acceptance and belonging. And then it became a whole montage, lights up, lights down, lights up, lights down of, chasing and, me in the squad car with my partner rolling the window down like a dog, like catching air. And some editors from DC Comics had come to the show and they were like, oh my gosh, we have to let the publisher know about this. And so then the publisher came, and then a couple weeks later I was like, hey, you want to flesh this out as a comic book character? And I'm like, sure, okay. So it ended up going into the back of Mark Russell's Exit Stage Left, the Snagglepuss Chronicles, as a backup story. And then it ended up eventually getting its own one-shot, which they gave me like 30 pages to tell whatever story I wanted. So I wanted to tell what her life was like in, she was from the Appalachian Mountains. So, but now she's in Los Angeles, and the logline for it was always an Audrey Hepburn-looking Sasquatch with Lucille Ball type personality with MacGyver-like skills, trying to make it in Los Angeles as a detective. So I wanted to tell what was the story to happen in the woods that would get her to Los Angeles. And then at the very end, that last page, tie every single thing back together. And then that's what I ended up doing. So.
Wow. That's incredible. Are there any plans to make it a animated series?
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
She was on the schedule. There's the DC universe that was going to go through HBO Max, but when AT&T bought Warner Brothers, AT&T just went through and laid off half the company in 3 different waves, and they were cutting divisions left and right, and DC Universe got cut from HBO Max. And so it was going to go in as almost like, if you remember, I don't know, was it the 80s, 90s, MTV had like liquid television, so it was going to go in as like 3 to 5 minute sketches. But all of that got cut, and it went away. So she's been pitched a couple of times to like this, and I've written her as like Adult Swim level, and I have written her as grade school age, because she's very diverse, and you can kind of put her wherever she needs to go. But so far, nothing has stuck, even though everybody's just like, I love this so much. And I'm like, thank you. But it's, it's timing, and it depends on what people are looking for at the time.
Right.
So.
Has Tanya Harding seen it by any chance?
That I don't know.
Because I'm sure that would tickle her to know that she was an inspiration, one of the inspirations for the character.
In the one shot, Tanya does mention that she was named after an aspiring figure skater that her mom knew had promise. And the timing of her age at the time and everything that it had come out, it had worked perfectly for her to be 20. So. Wow.
Now, getting back to the book, did that actress who played your mother and your grandmother, did it kind of like bring you back to that moment as you're hearing that? Because you were like, oh my God, this is deja vu 3 times over.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, my mom had. We haven't really ever. We've only talked about the book a few times, like my mom, just because. She gets torn down a little bit, but it's true. And, and so my mom has just been like, she'll just be like, well, it's, you're very descriptive, Brandee. Sorry. I'm like, hey, I changed the title from Jesus Hates Me to None of This Is Going According to Plan for you. So, yeah, give me some points.
Right. Yeah, because yeah, Jesus hates me. Though it is funny, I could see why other people would take it the wrong way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my mom's like, how am I going to share this with my church group? But I'm like, I don't know if you want to anyway. Because, yeah, you, I mean, that's why in the acknowledgement, you know, I have to say, you know, I love my mother. I absolutely love my mother,
Yeah.
but she's a character and she put me through the ringer
Right.
a lot.
Yeah.
You know,
Calling you at
even
work when you don't expect it, you know, you're in the middle of, it sounded like you were in the middle of something very important at that moment when she called you. But
well, and I mean, even if you've read the story, she fell off the turnip truck, which was a story about me doing an internship in New York City.
Right.
And I'm between I'm like 20, 21. I'm between seasons at film school, which was in Rockport, Maine, and they were seasons and not semesters because you couldn't put down dolly tracks in the snow.
No, you
so
can't.
I ended up getting an internship at this trailer company in New York City.
oh wow.
And my sister helped me get the interview, and it was like not planned. None of it was planned. And I went in, and it was in a 2-story fire station in like downtown Manhattan. And like, it's a crazy cool building surrounded by skyscrapers.
Yeah.
And I end up having this interview, and I met everybody in the company. There was only a handful of people. Everyone really liked me. It went
Right.
well, and they offered me the job. And so we were like, how do we tell my mom? How are we going to tell her? How is she going to let me stay? And so my mom was like, okay, I need an address, phone number, which is what she would have done, you know, if I'm like, hey, I have a friend and I'm going to sleep over at this person's house. I need the
Yes.
address, phone number, all of that. So you would give that up.
Right.
And so when I came in and started work on Monday morning, people treated me different. And I just could not understand, why are these people not being like, all of a sudden I'm like a leper, and I don't understand what, like, and I'm like, okay, whatever, maybe everyone's having a bad day, but I'm going to change their mind about me and I'm going to win them over. And it was probably 6 weeks later when one of them said, and I'm not going to say the word because it's not appropriate anymore. I think it's written in the book, but I'm not going to say it. But the guy says, well, you're not the R word anymore, you know, like we all thought you were. And I'm like, wait, what are you talking about?
Wow.
And they're like, well, your mother called in to the production office like 30 minutes before you came in on your first day, and Ron and Giacomo had you on speakerphone in the kitchen. Had my mom on speakerphone in the kitchen. And my mom basically told them that I was green, naive, and I had basically fallen off the turnip truck, and they needed to handle me with kid gloves. Wow. And these are like hardcore New Yorkers
Yes.
that now like don't want to deal with some fucking dumbass kid from Kansas. And they all heard it on a speakerphone in the kitchen in this 2-story fire station production office. And my mom like threw me under the bus. You know, and how well does, you know, when you were 20, how well did your mom know you? She, you know,
No.
yeah, like she didn't know, like I knew the streets, like, you know, but she thinks that this angelic halo, and then so she goes and tells these people. So I had to call an emergency meeting to be like, hey, you guys, just so you know, I am not the R word. Sorry. I am not mentally challenged like you all assume I am. You know, and it was like, and then they all thought it was, you know, Ron and Giacomo thought it was hilarious. And, you know, one's like, well, I'm Jewish, so I have a Jewish mom. And the other one's like, I'm Italian, so I have an Italian mom, so I get it. But we thought it was like the meanest, cruelest thing anyone had ever done, any parent had ever done to their child. And we knew that you weren't, but the other people that worked there just assumed that I was. And they just hated me for being there because they thought I was special needs. And it sucked. And I had to prove myself.
Yeah.
And so But again, that's a true story. And here's my
Yes.
mom having to read the damage that she did to me.
Yes,
Years
that had to
ago.
be. She was like
Yeah.
probably like, oh, she's
Yeah.
picking this up and read it like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah. It's funny how you say at the end of the Jesus call, she didn't want to talk about it, but it would come up years later.
Yeah. And well, that's why there's, oh God, I can't think of the name of the story, but Jesus comes back up. There's another Jesus reference where she has a thing years later. I had been carjacked. I was being mugged at the bottom of Universal, and I was meeting a friend to pick him up, but just the day, like the day or two before, my mom had randomly, all these years later, calls me again with another Jesus call. And I had told my friend Kyle, who I was going to pick up. And so then like two guys came up to me with a gun, or they both had guns. And you know, when you have guns pointed at your head, it's like, it's crazy what you remember. And I'm remembering an episode of Oprah from when I was a kid, and it was like, don't go to the second location, that's where you'll disappear. And so I have these two guys like tapping guns on my window in this dark metro parking lot, but I don't really know where I'm at. And I'm dumb. I wasn't thinking. I'm like in a dark parking lot with my phone lit up. My face is lit up like a Christmas tree. And I'm texting Kyle, like, what gate am I picking you up at? Because I had gotten there early. And so when this guy's like, you know, get out of your car, we're fucking cops. I'm like, and then I look over to my right, and there's another guy, and he's like, yeah, we're fucking cops. I'm like, fuck you. No, you're not. And it was just like, I'm in no mood. I am in no fucking mood. So I turned my car on, threw it in reverse, and as I'm backing out, I decided to turn a little harder, and I took out the guy on the left. And he knocks down, he pops my side mirror, and then his buddy walks over. And as I'm pulling out, in my head, I'm hearing a line from Steve Carell from Date Night, like, so as I'm like, part of me, I have like angel devil, like,
Yeah.
you know, yelling, wanting to be like, get out of here. And the other one is like, fuck you, pussies. And it's like, but I don't. And then it's like, I see the guy turn his gun sideways. And then in my head, I hear Steve Carell going, it's a kill shot. I don't know what I'm thinking. And so I throw my car and drive, and I go to take off. And so here it is, cut to, you know, now I'm surrounded by cops, and Kyle is like, finally comes down, and I'm surrounded by cops, and we're doing a police report, and Kyle's like, hey, Brandee, did you tell him that you're possessed by a demon? And Kyle's just like, yeah, did you tell him you're possessed by a demon? And I'm like, Kyle, not now, shut up. And of course the female cop is like, what is he talking about? And I'm like, it's a long story. I got a call from my mom the other day. Well, I haven't taken Jesus Christ into my heart yet. So again, she thinks I'm possessed by a demon. And you're like, okay. So anyway, that story is in the book as well.
You see, there's
So
so
when I
much
see-
in this book. This is why you got to get it, everybody. On Amazon. Where else can they buy it?
You can buy it on Amazon.com, and you can also buy it on BarnesandNoble.com.
You know, that's quite a story that you just told there. Now, of survival, it's amazing that, you know, a punchline comes in there amidst the drama and near-death experience. But,
Yeah.
you know, honestly, back in the days of bookstores, I know Barnes & Noble is still there, but it kind of feels like you're going back in time when you go there. I miss the days of going to Borders, though. And honestly, if this was like 2009 and your book had come out, and I'd be the guy sitting in the coffee shop, and I'd be cracking up reading your book, because those are the types of books I gravitate towards, comedy books. But this is real life too,
Yeah.
because real life is often juxtaposed and like surreal and funny, and nothing ever goes to plan. And some people especially agnostics, will say, you know, you want to make God laugh, say, I got a plan. And that's that's the title of the book. None of this is going according to plan. Well, Brandee, it's been great having you on the show. And what do you got coming up down the pike? What's your next project?
Well, I have one thing happening, like I signed an NDA on, so I can't really talk about that.
Of course.
I have been greenlit for a sequel for None of This Is Going According to Plan. And I think later it's still July, so I think by the end of August I'm going to start recording the Audible, because everything it takes time. And
it does take time. I understand.
Something that I have hardly any time anymore. So, yeah, like that's what I have going on right now, I guess.
Wow. Well, I'm so glad Jennifer Perry had reached out to me and told me you got to talk about her book, and I wanted to do more than that. And so everyone I've told about, especially via social media, is all saying, yeah, I'm going to get my hands on this book. So, and
oh, thank you.
Yeah, of course. So it's been great finally meeting you, Brandee, and look forward to hearing about your future projects.
Oh, thank you so much. Absolutely.
This was He Said, She Heard. Sound effects provided by Zapsplat.com and Fesleyan Studios. Comedy performances by Catabell and Mike Fox, and music by Matthias Signoroli. Catabell's website is catabell.com. That's KATABELLE.com, and she's available for hire. Matthias Signoroli's website, en.mattiartist.com. He is also available for hire, and don't forget to get your copy of None of This Is Going According to Plan, out now on Amazon.